The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Marcus Coleman's corner office, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany desk. As one of the city's most successful business owners, Marcus had grown accustomed to the quiet luxury that surrounded him. His office on the 32nd floor overlooked the bustling streets below, where tiny figures moved like ants through their daily routines. Marcus adjusted his navy blue tie and glanced at his watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock, and his fiancée Sarah would arrive soon for their lunch planning meeting. They had been engaged for 6 months now, and their wedding was just 8 weeks away. Everything seemed perfect on the surface. Sarah was beautiful, charming, and seemed to genuinely care for him. Yet lately, something had been nagging at the back of his mind, a feeling he couldn't quite shake. The elevator chimed softly down the hall, and Marcus heard the familiar click of high heels approaching his office. Sarah appeared in the doorway, her blonde hair catching the morning light. She wore a cream-colored blazer that complemented her fair complexion, and her smile was as warm as always. "Good morning, darling," Sarah said, crossing the room to give him a quick kiss on the cheek. "I hope you don't mind, but I brought my niece Emma with me today. My sister had an emergency at work, and I couldn't find anyone else to watch her." Marcus looked past Sarah to see a young girl, perhaps 8 or 9 years old, standing quietly in the doorway. Emma had dark brown hair that fell just past her shoulders, and she wore a simple navy blue sweater. Her large eyes took in everything around her with the careful observation that children often possessed. "Of course, that's perfectly fine," Marcus said, genuinely pleased. He had always enjoyed children's company, finding their honesty refreshing in a world full of business politics and carefully crafted words. "Hello, Emma. Would you like to see my office?" Emma nodded shyly and stepped into the room, her small hand clutching a worn stuffed rabbit. She moved slowly around the space, examining the awards on the walls, the leather-bound books on the shelves, and the small collection of art pieces that Marcus had carefully chosen over the years. Sarah settled into one of the chairs across from Marcus's desk, pulling out her tablet to review their wedding plans. "I've been thinking about the flower arrangements," she began, but Marcus found himself watching Emma instead. The little girl had stopped near the far corner of the office, where a large painting of a sailing ship hung on the wall. Emma stood very still for a long moment, then turned to look at Marcus with an expression that seemed far too serious for someone her age. She glanced at Sarah, who was absorbed in her tablet, then back at Marcus. Something in her demeanor made him pay closer attention. The child walked slowly toward his desk, her small feet making almost no sound on the thick carpet. When she reached the edge of his desk, she looked up at him with those large, thoughtful eyes. Then she did something unexpected. Emma leaned forward and cupped her small hand around her mouth as if she wanted to tell him a secret. Marcus bent down slightly, bringing his ear closer to her. What she whispered next made his blood run cold. "There's a camera in your office," she said, her voice barely audible. "Behind the painting of the boat." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat, but he forced himself to remain calm. He straightened up slowly, giving Emma a gentle smile that he hoped didn't betray the shock he felt inside. The little girl stepped back and returned to examining the books on his shelf, as if nothing had happened. Sarah was still focused on her tablet, discussing centerpiece options and menu choices. Marcus nodded and responded appropriately, but his mind was racing. How could Emma know about a camera? And why would there be one in his office in the first place? As Sarah continued talking, Marcus found himself studying her more carefully than he had in months. He noticed how her eyes occasionally darted around the room, how she seemed to position herself where she could see his computer screen, how she asked detailed questions about his business meetings and travel plans. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The woman he was planning to marry, the woman he had trusted with his heart and his future, might be spying on him. But why? And for whom? Over the next hour, Marcus went through the motions of wedding planning while his mind worked furiously. He remembered odd conversations, times when Sarah had seemed unusually interested in his business dealings, moments when he had found her in his home office when she claimed to be using the bathroom. Emma remained quiet throughout their meeting, but Marcus caught her watching him several times with those perceptive eyes. When Sarah excused herself to use the restroom, Marcus seized his opportunity. "Emma," he said gently, "can you tell me more about what you saw?" The little girl looked toward the bathroom door, then back at Marcus. "My daddy works with computers," she whispered. "He taught me about cameras and things that watch people. The painting has a little hole in it, right where the sail meets the sky." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. He had trusted Sarah completely, shared his business plans, his financial information, even his personal struggles. If she was working for someone else, a competitor perhaps, or worse, the damage could be catastrophic. When Sarah returned, Marcus made a decision. "You know what?" he said. "I just remembered I have a conference call in a few minutes. Why don't we continue this over lunch instead?" Sarah's smile faltered slightly, but she quickly recovered. "Of course, darling. Should Emma and I wait outside?" "Actually," Marcus said, "why don't you both head home? I'll pick you up at noon, and we can go to that little cafe you like." After they left, Marcus sat alone in his office, staring at the painting Emma had indicated. He could see it now, a tiny, almost invisible hole in the canvas, positioned exactly where the child had described. His hand shook slightly as he reached for his phone to call his head of security. The investigation that followed moved quickly. The camera was sophisticated, wirelessly transmitting everything to an off-site location. The trail led to a private investigation firm that specialized in corporate espionage, and the client who had hired them was Marcus's biggest business rival, a man who had lost several major contracts to Marcus's company over the past year. Sarah's real name wasn't Sarah Mitchell, as she had claimed. She was Sarah Chen, a professional who specialized in getting close to targets and extracting information. The engagement ring on her finger was as fake as everything else about their relationship. The confrontation, when it came, was quiet and businesslike. Sarah didn't deny the accusations when presented with the evidence. She simply looked at Marcus with something that might have been regret and said, "I'm sorry it had to be this way." "Was any of it real?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Some of it," she said finally. "More than it should have been." 3 weeks later, Marcus found himself in a different kind of meeting. Emma sat across from him in the same chair Sarah had occupied, but this time she was eating ice cream and chattering happily about her school projects. Her aunt, Emma's mother, sat beside her, smiling warmly. "I still can't believe Emma noticed that camera," she said. "She's always been observant, but that was incredible." Marcus looked at Emma, who had chocolate ice cream smudged on her cheek. "You saved me from making a terrible mistake," he told her seriously. "Thank you." Emma grinned, revealing a gap where she had recently lost a tooth. "My daddy says bad people sometimes try to trick good people. But if you pay attention, you can usually tell." Marcus nodded, understanding that this 8-year-old had taught him something valuable about trust, observation, and the importance of listening to the quiet warnings that life sometimes offered. The camera was gone. Sarah was out of his life, and his business was secure. But more importantly, he had learned to trust his instincts again, and sometimes the most important truths came from the most unexpected sources, even from a shy little girl who noticed what adults missed. The afternoon sun streamed through his office windows, and for the first time in months, Marcus felt truly at peace.